All right, Danielle, I don't know if you can share. I posted it to the North Stonington page, so I don't know if you want to share it to your page from there.
Yep, I will. Let's see if
All right,
can
Steve, you're
figure out.
welcome to do. Well, if you wanted to, I'm gonna also post it to another page on a group page that I think maybe will get some interest. All right. Are you good, Danielle?
Yeah, I can't figure out how to share the live video, but I shared the event again, so I think that's fine.
Okay. I wonder if I can do it. Hang on.
We've done this enough. You think I'd figure this out?
Yeah, right. All right, well, that's the best I can do there. So I'm just going to refresh your page in case anybody. Okay, perfect. All right, so we've got a few people showing up. This is being broadcast on Facebook Live, and actually, let me hit the record button. We will also record this, and we'll post it to the town YouTube page tomorrow for anyone who's not on social media that wanted to take a look at it. But I'd like to welcome anyone who's attending tonight, and certainly welcome our panelists here. I'm Mike Ergel. I'm the first selectman in North Stonington, and I'm just very happy tonight to be joined by First Selectwoman Danielle Cheesebro from Stonington, Steve Mansfield from LedgeLight Health District, and his colleague Ethan Weiner. So with that, really the whole agenda for tonight will be a 1 hour discussion if we go that long. We'd love to have participation and questions from anyone who'd like. I'll be monitoring the North Stonington Town Facebook page and also the Town of Stonington Facebook page, and you can comment your questions on there if you'd like. You can also dial in if you haven't to certainly ask a question when that time comes up. And all you have to do if you're on the phone is just click *6 to unmute yourself when the time comes, or just hit the raise hand feature in the Zoom side there, and we'll go ahead and recognize you to be able to ask your questions. But what we wanted to do was kind of start off with a lay of the land and turn it over to Steve and Ethan for 15 minutes or so to give us some updates, and then Danielle will give some updates and I'll give some, and hopefully we have a good half hour or more for Q&A. So with that, Steve, the floor is yours, Director of Health of LedgeLight Health District. We're really pleasure to have you with us tonight.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening, everyone. As most of you probably know, LedgeLight Health District has been responding to the COVID pandemic for going on 10.5 months now. We've been conducting contact tracing activities, enforcement of the governor's executive orders, providing guidance to our municipal partners to help assure that we do everything we can to lessen the morbidity and mortality associated with this pandemic. And that's not no small task for sure. As we move into this vaccination phase, I know one of the most pressing questions that everyone is asking is, when will vaccine become available? When can I receive it? And is it safe? I think those are the three most common questions that we receive every day here. So I'm going to start with a brief overview of the different priority groups that the CDC has recommended for COVID vaccination. And please keep in mind that these recommendations are just that. The Connecticut Department of Public Health can decide to modify these priority groups as they see fit moving forward. So far, we haven't seen that happen. Generally, states agree with what the CDC advisory groups come out with, but it's always possible that they may reprioritize based on a certain situation that is occurring within the state of Connecticut. So what we know now, at this point in time, we have been provided definitive guidance and information regarding the first priority group, known as Phase 1A, and I'm sure everyone has heard about this Phase 1A rollout in the media. This priority group includes frontline medical personnel who have already begun to receive the vaccinations. These vaccinations are being received primarily in hospital settings. Excuse me. It also includes the vaccination of those living and working in long-term care facilities. And it's important to note that unlike in the hospital setting, these vaccinations are being provided by third parties. Walgreens and CVS has a contract, and they're doing the majority of these vaccinations in long-term care facilities. Of course, the hospital and local health departments and some federally qualified health centers are available to assist if needed, but so far they're doing those vaccinations themselves. Medical first responders also are involved in this 1A group, but it isn't every first responder out there, not every fireman, not every policeman, but rather only those who provide medical transport in response to 911 calls. They're the only ones who are eligible for vaccine during this initial vaccination stage. As I'll get to in just a minute, when we get to Phase 1B, they are considered critical workforce, essential workforce, and they will be available to get the vaccine as well. But there is a lot of prioritization going on within the 1A group at this point in time. So within LedgeLight Health District, Lawrence Memorial Hospital will be providing and currently is providing the majority of vaccinations to the emergency responder community, those that are eligible. And although the vaccine that will be used during this initial stage is primarily the Pfizer vaccine, other manufacturers are being added to that supply chain every day. It should be noted that there is quite a bit of prioritization going on during Phase 1 in the hospital, as well as among first responders. So basically those people who are most at risk are receiving the vaccine first, and others will receive it as the vaccine becomes more plentiful. For example, my wife is a wound care nurse. She works at Lawrence Memorial. Although she's eligible right now, there simply isn't enough vaccine available to get her vaccinated. So those forward-facing first responders, those ones who are transporting patients who have COVID or are most at risk for getting the disease, are receiving it at this point in time until it becomes more plentiful. As we move forward, we'll be getting into, as I mentioned, Phase 1 and Phase 1B and Phase 1C within Connecticut. But as of this afternoon, no further decisions have been made at the state level regarding what groups will be in Phase 1B and 1C. Now, that being said, as I mentioned before, this weekend, the CDC recommended that frontline essential workers and individuals 75 years of age or older be included in Phase 1B, and that other essential workers will be in Phase 1C. So the governor's COVID-19 vaccine advisory group's allocation subcommittee will be addressing the topic of Phase 1B and 1C shortly. We expect their decision to closely mirror what the CDC says, as I said before. It's such a fluid situation. The reason why I started that paragraph with the fact that as of this afternoon, we don't know, it's literally so fluid that I wouldn't be surprised if before the end of this call or tomorrow morning, we wake up and see new guidelines that have been put out from by the State Department of Public Health that mirror the CDC recommendation. And of course, we'll get that information out as quickly as we can. So right now, LedgeLight Health District and other health districts across the state are planning mass vaccination scenarios. Some of them involve small scale, what we call strike team scenarios, where we will identify a relatively small group of people, say all the fire personnel in the town of Stonington, and then have a clinic at one of the firehouses and get them all done in an afternoon. One of the other scenarios is a larger mass vaccination scenario. Every year we drill and exercise our mass vaccination plans. We vaccinate hundreds of people to make sure that we have the ability to, for instance, stand up a mass vaccination clinic, a drive-through clinic, and so forth. So we're prepared to do that if need be, and we expect we will be using some of those larger mass vaccination scenarios as we get into the springtime and the vaccine becomes available to everyone who is not available during the first phases. We expect to put our first order in for the vaccine this week, and we'll be assisting our partners in vaccinations during all of the future phases, but even during 1A, we may assist Lawrence Memorial Hospital or the long-term care facilities. As I said, we have the plans in place and we have the vaccinators ready. So like a lot of health districts, we will be receiving vaccine shortly. And I do want to say that we encourage everyone to take advantage of the vaccine as soon as it becomes available to them. Of course, different people fall into different groups, but I think it's essential that the public understand this is one of the best tools we have to get a handle on this pandemic. So we strongly encourage everybody to jump on it as soon as they can. I now like to turn this presentation over to my colleague, Dr. Ethan Weiner, who will provide you with an overview of the specific vaccines, including some information about their effectiveness and their safety. Dr. Weiner is a consultant in drug development who's lived in East Lyme for the past 30 years. He received his MD from Johns Hopkins University and trained in internal medicine at Montefiore Hospital in the Bronx and in rheumatology at UConn Health Center, where he was on the faculty before spending 20 years at Pfizer, where he was responsible for designing and analyzing clinical trials in order to understand the safety and effectiveness of new drugs. So I think it's obvious why I asked him to join us today. This is definitely out of my realm of expertise, but we're glad to have him here. Since Dr. Weiner left Pfizer in 2009, he's placed an emphasis on analyzing drug safety and clinical trial design. And he's also participated in independent data safety monitoring boards for clinical trials. He's been with the LedgeLight Health District Medical Reserve Corps. We're proud to have him as a member of our team. He's currently assists with our contact tracing activities and providing vaccinations. So Dr. Weiner, I'll turn it over to you. You have the floor. And I'm happy to stay on and answer questions anybody may have. Thanks very much.
Okay, so first, just want to sort of orient you to the whole process by which these vaccines are developed, because there's a lot of talk that corners were cut and things like that. So I just want to walk you quickly through the process and what the whole emergency use authorization is all about, and we'll get into the specifics. But basically, the way vaccines are developed, and these two are no exceptions, is you have small studies in, like a handful up to maybe a couple hundred people, where you're taking very detailed measurements of the vaccine. How long does it stick around? Do you need a booster shot? What's the best dose? Both companies actually tested a few different variants on their vaccine to find the best one. Then they move on to these really big studies that have thousands of people. And generally, to get a vaccine approved, you follow them for maybe 18 months or 2 years or so. And you submit for approval for what's called a BLA, or biologic license application, when you've had at least about 6 months of data following a few thousand people. So that's the sort of standard thing. In the case of the COVID situation, because it's such an emergency, everything was done exactly the same. It's just where you send in your first data cut to get authorization to be used, which is an emergency use authorization. It's different. The companies actually can't sell the vaccine to individual people or anything like that, or it's got to be done through government channels and things like that. It's still technically experimental. The only difference is that because we need vaccines now, is rather than wait for 6 months, we sort of cut it at 2 months and look at what data we have on those people 2 months after they got their last vaccination. The studies are still ongoing, so in time, the 6-month data will come out, and all the 18-month data and everything that would normally be done. And the companies are obligated to submit for a BLA when they have the approval to do so. The only difference is that while it's still in this late experimental stage where there's 2 months of data versus 6, it's out there treating people. The other thing to bear in mind is that about 90+% of the long-term side effects that you're going to see after vaccine, you're going to see in the first 2 months. So those extra 4 months are nice to have under your belt, but it's sort of a, everybody felt that it was a luxury that you can't afford to do. Now, the whole process also is totally transparent. And I don't have any inside track at this. I haven't worked at Pfizer for 10 years. I have no access to confidential information. But I got all of my information, which is very detailed, from the FDA's website. And if you want to just Google 2020 meeting materials, vaccines and related biological products advisory committee, you get a link. And there's 2 dates. You click on the links, and within that is about 100 pages of detailed tables and reports from both the sponsor and the FDA. And there's also a link to recorded 8-hour advisory committee deliberations for each of the 2 drugs. So 16 hours of video altogether. And anybody can read that and judge for themselves what's going on. A lot of the language is technical, but at the end of each of those documents, there's a risk-benefit assessment that is very upfront about what we know, what we don't know, what the risks are, what the benefits are. And that's pretty much in normal English. So, if you have concerns, it's certainly a good place to look and check it out for yourself. It's all very open and above board. So let's get to the results quickly. First of all, both vaccines are similar in their composition. They're mRNA vaccines. That's a new kind of vaccine. Most of all the vaccines to date have given either killed virus or attenuated live virus or something like that. This is actually a piece of messenger RNA, which basically is the code that tells the cells how to make a protein. And it's telling them how to make the spike protein from the virus. So you inject it into the patient. It's in these little lipid nanoparticles. They get absorbed by the lymphatic system, taken to immune cells. The protein is expressed on their surface, and then your body reacts to that. Just like if you're really infected with the virus, you'd also be putting out that spike protein on your cells too. So that's basically the principle behind it. And that's what allowed these vaccines. One of the reasons why things are so quick. That's another question people ask. So number one, you can make an mRNA vaccine very quickly if you know the structure of the virus, which, was, I think, within a month of the whole thing starting, before it even came here, the whole genome was sequenced. So they could very quickly make this mRNA, as opposed to fiddling around for years trying to find a weakened virus or some viral vector or something like that. Number two is that they did a lot of stuff in parallel that they usually do in series. They went all out with it. So, usually you wait till you've got good evidence of efficacy before you even start to mass produce this stuff. But, they were mass producing things when they just had a guess of what was going on. And then again, you save quite a few months by cutting it at 2 months instead of 6 months. So that's the speed part of it. So what they ended up doing is that Pfizer did their big study in the US, Turkey, and Latin America. Moderna just did theirs in the US. So Pfizer enrolled 40,000 people to get 2 injections 1 month apart, half of them with just saline as placebo, and half with the actual vaccine. And basically about 15,000 of the 40,000 were followed 2 months or longer. So those are really big numbers by any standards. They're certainly not smaller than your average vaccine study, and probably bigger than most of them, actually. Moderna did something similar. The recruitment was a little slower, so they had 28,000 treated, and about 7,500 followed for 2 months or longer. As far as the population breakdowns, despite being done in different countries, as you'd expect, it's like half women, half men, just about splits down the middle. About 10% Black or African American in both, 20% Hispanic. And actually, Moderna, not Pfizer, sort of created a category of communities of color, which basically is everybody that is not white, non-Hispanic. And about 40% of their population fit that bill. And I think if Pfizer had done the same thing, they'd get about the same number. So it's a good representation, or decent representation at least, of some of the most vulnerable communities. About 25% were over 65 years old. And because of their big studies, the placebo group and the vaccine group were pretty well balanced for risk factors and ongoing diseases and things like that. So to cut to the chase, they measure effectiveness by how many cases of COVID people got starting 1 week after the second vaccination when they're fully vaccinated. And then you just go on in time and just see how many cases accrue. And basically the effectiveness is the ratio of the 1 minus the ratio of the percent of people on vaccine that get sick divided by the people not on vaccine that get sick. And both come out to be about 95% effective in terms of how many more people got COVID in the placebo group. So what basically happens, someone comes down with suspicious symptoms, they get a nasal swab just like anybody else. And if they have certain symptoms and they're positive, they're counted as a case. They also took a look at a bunch of other things. So first they cut it down by people under 65, over 65, so old versus young, non-white versus white, Hispanic versus non-Hispanic, and even the few people that they had with underlying risk factors. And in all of those, the effectiveness was also about 95%. One of the things is just confidence bounds, how sure you are of that it really is that amount. And the more patients you have, the tighter those bounds are. So when you look at everybody, those bounds are very tight. So worst case scenario, we're 95% sure that in both of them, the effectiveness is better than like 85% or so. And, and it could be as high as 100%. Well, actually, technically not, but very close to that. As you take these smaller and smaller groups, those vaccine bounds become somewhat wider. But the point estimates are the same, meaning that, if you studied a whole bunch more, you get those narrow bounds too. They were also highly effective so if you cut that down, they were also highly effective in the severe group. So but they also had a definition for a severe disease. And in the Moderna case, for instance, 0 had severe disease on the vaccine, 11 in placebo, and Pfizer 1 on vaccine, 3 on placebo. Those numbers are very small. So it's hard to say too much about that, other than that there seemed to be, in one case 100%, in the other case 66% effective. But I think as the numbers accrue, we'll see where that settles out, somewhere in between. And for anyone with disease, what you're looking at is like a handful of COVID patients, maybe 6 or 7 in the vaccine group, and like about 100 plus in the placebo group over time. And if we have time at the end, I can share my screen and show that to you graphically, but we'll just keep going for now. So they're both highly effective in preventing regular disease and severe disease. The one COVID death that occurred was in a placebo patient in the Moderna database. Now, the overall rate of people getting COVID and dying of COVID was a little bit low for what's happening right now, but you have to remember that most of those 2 months that we're looking at were accrued sort of late spring, early summer, midsummer, when things were not as bad as they are now. So turning to safety, both of the vaccines showed the usual kind of vaccine side effects that you see. And both studies carefully looked at symptoms the week after each injection. And so the things that you see are pain at the injection site, swelling, fatigue, low-grade fever, sometimes a little bit of nausea, and things like that, that you see after every vaccine. After the second shot, not surprisingly, it was worse than after the first shot. And, a good number of people had some of those things. I'd say probably, if you, any of them, probably on the order of 60 or 70%, but mostly mild. And they, very few severe ones. So you can count them on the fingers of one hand out of 40,000 people or so. So they're generally mild, and they generally peak about the day after the injection, and they gradually get better. Oddly enough, the reactions were worse for younger people than older people. And the reason, which is opposite of what you usually expect. And the reason for that is most of these vaccine reactions indicate that it's working, and younger people do have more active immune systems, so they get revved up more. It was somewhat pleasant, actually, that the efficacy was as good in older people as younger people. Most people didn't expect that. There was some serious adverse events in both studies. Most felt to be unrelated to the vaccine. And the deaths were all balanced, and as much as about 3 or 4 in each of the groups in the studies. And they were due to things like strokes, heart attacks, usual stuff, except for the one COVID death, which, was probably a result of having been in the placebo group and that one unfortunate person. There were some things that are called hypersensitivity events, which we'll get back to later, but things like facial swelling that was seen more in the Moderna group, although a little bit in the Pfizer group, and Bell's palsy, which is a sort of facial paralysis that you can get from viral infections and things like that. Very rare, like 2 or 3 in the placebo groups. If you put the 2 studies together, and maybe like 4 or 5 in the treated groups. A lot of debate at the advisory committee whether that's just, small numbers being random or something going on, because the placebo rate's sort of what you see for background, and the vaccine rate's a little higher, but it's still a very rare event when you're talking about, following a total of about 65, 70,000 people for 2 months.
So, Dr. Weiner, I want to, if I could, not to interrupt you, I want to just try to
Sure.
get a couple of updates from the, I'd like to have Selectwoman Cheesebro give us a Stonington update. I know that there's things going on there and for us, and then we want to have some opportunity for Q&A if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I went on a little long.
No problem. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time, and also open it up if people have questions about all of this. Obviously, it's a lot of information for people to digest, and we're excited that you were able to join us with your knowledge base for our communities. So, Danielle, did you want to give an update on things happening in Stonington?
Yeah, no, I'll keep mine short. It was really wonderful. I learned a lot. So thank you very much, Dr. Weiner, and also always to Stephen for the great updates and information from LedgeLight. I think on the Stonington side, really just to remind people that we do have a constant COVID update on our town website. So every Friday when the state and LedgeLight share numbers and information with us, we update that. Every Friday you can see that. And then we do also try and share updates as they become more timely as well on social media. So please do check there. In addition, I'd say one of our big focus that we're trying to have throughout the winter is on a mental health matters campaign. We're already starting to get more and more concerned, whether it's financial hardship or isolation that people are facing as the COVID numbers are going up and winter months are coming and we're moving more indoors. So we just want to be sure everyone in the community educates themselves, know the warning signs. It can impact young children, teens, people our age, seniors, everyone. No one is immune to this. So please do be on the lookout for yourself and for others. Educate yourself, know the warning signs. We did a video last week on the town website with our amazing Director of Human Services, Leanne Theodore, and one of her fantastic counselors, Miranda, who helped share some tips about what to look for, resources that are out there, both in terms of Stonington. We have free counseling for anyone, any age, they say school age on up. That would like free counseling services. They do 12 sessions. They'll do it virtually or in person if preferred. So there are resources here, and if we don't have them here, we'll connect you to other nonprofits and other great resources in the greater community. So that's one of our big efforts. We do have some mental health matters signs that are going to start going up when the snow clears around town. And if any business or resident who lives on a frequently traveled road would like one, it would be really helpful to help get the word out about this kind of ongoing effort. And then just for those on social media, through Human Services, we've also created 3 new social media pages, one called Stonington Connects, another Stonington Supports, and sensing a theme here, the other one is Stonington Works. So a range of pages where people can post and look at either opportunities around work or support programs, basic needs, as well as just how to connect more, whether it's virtual rec opportunities or interactions. So that you can see kind of we have a thematic focus for this one. And then the final plug I just wanted to make is we have this organization called SHARE. Stonington helps residents in emergencies, and they'll help people really all around the sort of greater region, if you will. So just call them. They have a website. We have links to them on all of our social media, on our website, on our COVID update, but they'll do everything from helping you get groceries to pet supplies, to even dropping off a book from a local library or doing a phone call check-in if you prefer. So just, I can think, just don't hesitate to reach out to us. And if we can't help you, we'll try and find somebody else who can. And I'll stop there. So hopefully we have some time for questions to LedgeLight.
That's great, Danielle. And on the in North Stonington, so really great updates from Stonington, and just some things happening, and really just would like to just focus on the fact that the holidays are next week, and obviously I love the focus on mental health. It's really, really important right now. I know it's a tough time of year anyway, and with this, it's just compounded. But the reality is the virus is exploding, I guess you'd say, right now. I think it's at the worst it's been, no question. Here in North Stonington, we're seeing about a third of the amount of cases we've had overall have been in the last couple of weeks. So we're seeing big increases, and I just want to encourage everyone to just wear those masks. I mean, just keep wearing the mask. That is the vaccine we have right now. We don't have a vaccine for most people. If you're making a choice to go with any family members over the holidays, I would encourage you to wear a mask with your family members. That if they're not in your direct household that you're normally around, take those precautions. It's just not worth, having a spread that you just weren't expecting because somebody was asymptomatic. So obviously this continues to be a serious threat. We're seeing the hospitalizations. Unfortunately, we're still seeing fatalities, although treatment has come a long way. It's still something that's very concerning. So we just want to encourage everybody to keep wearing those masks and just keep doing the right thing. Keep your distance, keep your close contacts to a minimum, if at all possible. I know some people that's less possible than others, but if it is possible for you, just if you're meeting with somebody, keep that 6 feet of distance, have that mask on. There's just no reason not to do it. I just want to mention that, meetings continue here virtually like they have all along, and town hall continues to be open by appointment now. So if you need anything, just give us a call. We're happy to, have appointments and have you come in. We do have the doors locked regularly, but anyone can come in for an appointment, and we'll always make that available as we have all throughout this. And The swap shed is closed, just for anyone who's interested, especially coming on Christmas here. Sadly, I know there's folks who'd love to be able to donate things. There are a lot of great organizations out there you can donate to locally. And those organizations actually take those items and some of them sell them and they use those funds for a good purpose for those who are less fortunate. So I just encourage that. So that's really it on the North Stonington side of things. With that, I'd like to just open it up if for any questions that there are. So this panel might be able to help answer them. So I have the Facebook pages up here on my screen, and I can try to keep an eye on those. If anyone wants to type in a question on Facebook, I'll be happy to read it. Or if you're on the phone, all you have to do is raise your hand. We'd love to have some questions, some things that might be on your mind that you might be wondering about. Great opportunity here. So I'll pause and see if there are any questions.
Mike, while you're waiting, I've got a list of them for Dr. Weiner. I'll just start with the most basic one, I think. Dr. Weiner, you mentioned speeding up the process earlier, and I know that's a big concern of the public that this happens so quickly. But you also said, it was put through very vigorous trials, and the first couple of months are the most important when you're trying to look for adverse reactions. So I guess I want your professional opinion as someone who has done this for a living for decades. Are you comfortable with the process that the vaccine development has gone through? And are you an advocate of encouraging the public to get out there and get this vaccine?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I mean, there's still a lot of stuff we don't know. And again, the documents and the deliberations are very upfront about that. We'll know it in a few months, but I think they did a really good job with it so far. I'm going to take it myself as soon as they let me, and I have encouraged all my family and friends to do likewise. So yeah, I'm pretty confident, and especially because again, they're upfront with what they don't know. I can weigh that and sort of judge, and to me, it's still worth the risk for the benefit.
Yeah, my
I do have a hand up, Steve. So if I could go to the Brian Rathman. Go ahead, Brian. You're recognized. You just have to unmute.
Okay. Yeah. It's pretty informative. I'm just concerned with I'm concerned about the schools, obviously, which everybody is, and I'm wondering if who makes the final call of how the schools are going to operate. I mean, I've heard pros and cons. I've heard people accusing these and people accusing them. I know a superintendents, I think, usually make the calls, and I was just wondering if LedgeLight and the superintendents are totally in contact with each other on everything about the schooling of the kids.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that one. Brian, thanks for the question. It's a good one and one we get frequently. I speak with Peter Nero on a very regular basis in North Stonington and the superintendent in Stonington. So it is ultimately up to the superintendent to make the final decision about what to do with schools, to stay in the current hybrid model, to move toward full remote, to move toward full in person. So it is ultimately the decision of the superintendent. However, since the beginning of the pandemic, every superintendent in our jurisdiction has taken our advice as the local health authority about what to do and how to move forward. But I also want to keep in mind, it's not just Peter, it's not just me. We have a cadre of people behind us, the State Department of Education, the State Department of Public Health, and there are plenty of documents out there that provide guidance and metrics to consider when we're deciding where we should go. I can tell you the reason why we're staying in a full hybrid model now is because our schools are an incredibly safe place to be, especially in North Stonington. The number of cases that we're seeing in our school systems is far less than what we're seeing in our general community. So if we're thinking about staff and students being safe as our first concern, then let's not fix what's not broken. If we see that the the disease rates are going up in our school system, then we may want to reconsider moving to a full, more remote model. Or conversely, if we see no one's getting sick and our mitigation efforts are really, really working, then maybe we consider moving to a more in-person model. But right now, we're sitting in the same place and not a lot has changed. So I applaud all the efforts of both North Stonington and Stonington school systems and their daily communication about doing the right thing to protect the students and staff.
Steve, you can go with your questions you had because there's no other hands up right now, and I don't see anything unless Danielle, you have anything on your end.
I actually had one that I think, Steve, you might be better able to answer, but we heard from more than one person. They thought, oh, if we go and get a COVID test, or we require or ask our family or guests to get a COVID test and it comes back negative, we're safe to then get together for Christmas or for a holiday party. Could you share your thoughts from LedgeLight's perspective on kind of testing and using that as a safety barometer?
Sure, and that's a real common question, and I think a misconception that a lot of people have. I'll use the example of beach water sampling. I think it's a good one. LedgeLight Health District is responsible for assuring that our beaches are safe for people to go swimming during the swimming season. So every Monday morning we go out and we take water samples and we send them to the laboratory. They analyze them for indicator organisms that may mean that there are pathogenic organisms in the water. And if they're clean, we give it a thumbs up. If they're not, we start retesting and posting advisories and closures. But keep in mind, that's only a grab sample. We're only looking at one little vial of water, and the same holds true for COVID. So when I go and get tested on Tuesday because I have some symptoms that I'm not sure what they are, and it comes back negative, that means I'm not negative at that point. I'm sorry, I'm not testing positive at that point in time. It doesn't mean I don't have COVID. It could very well be that it hasn't risen to the level in my bloodstream, that virus burden, that it will show up in a test. Also, it's very likely that you can be exposed to COVID and be in that incubation period and develop symptoms later. And if you happen to test negative on Wednesday and then you go to your mom and dad's on Friday, you could be infecting your parents. So what we always say to people is testing is great. It gets asymptomatic people off of the street so they don't infect other people, but it doesn't negate the need for quarantine if you're exposed to other people, or isolation if you're experiencing symptoms. It's a great thing to do for sure, but it doesn't take away the need for social distancing and maintaining all of those preventative measures that we put in place to keep the rates of COVID down.
We have a question here from the chat. Dr. Weiner, in the Pfizer and Moderna phase 3 trials, were the participants challenged with anything to test efficacy of vaccine, just being in high-risk situations and comparing placebo and vaccinated? Question mark. You're muted.
It's just the second one. They didn't challenge people. There's a lot of ethical issues about doing that because there's no cure, there's no really good treatment. So if someone gets sick, if you challenge them and they're in the placebo group, you know, there can be a lot of irreversible damage done.
I'm sorry, could you explain, to interrupt, but could you explain challenge? I'm sure a lot of us don't know what that means.
I think what they meant is that you actually take a bunch of volunteers, you give half of them the vaccine, half of them placebo, and then put them into a room with somebody with COVID who's sneezing or something like that. And, you know, then see what happens. And it is, you know, people actually in the UK have advocated this because it's fast and you can learn this stuff in a much shorter period of time, but there are serious ethical concerns with it. So no one in the US would get permission from an institutional review board to be able to do that, which is a good thing. And also, you know, you wouldn't get any long-term safety data either from that, which is really what most people are really concerned about.
She thanks you for the answer. If anyone has questions, they can raise their hand if you're on the call. If you're on the Facebook page, either the Stonington or North Stonington, just simply type your question. I'm actually watching at the North Stonington Town group as well. If you have anything, feel free to type it there. Steve, I know you had some other questions. There's no hands up right now. Go for it. You're muted.
You're muted.
I got to get a T-shirt that says that.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who does it.
I did it just to make you feel better, doctor. No, I'm just kidding. So you mentioned before that some of these manufacturers went into production prior to getting approval, way before they would normally. I would assume from a business perspective, that's a big risk, number one, because you could go into production and spend millions on filling vials with vaccine that has to go back to the drawing board. But secondly, it inspires confidence because these manufacturers are so confident in their vaccine that they're willing to go into production. Any comment on that?
No, I think that sums it up. I mean, usually they don't do that because you go broke as a drug company if you made warehouses full of stuff, considering that, only like 1 out of 10 drugs that go into people in the first study ever make it out the other end to get approved. It generally is not done till you're way far in the process. So this was all done at risk because time is so critical. And then some of that was federal funding, and I think Pfizer funded themselves, I'm not sure, but it's not the normal way of doing business, but it's not cutting a corner. It's just taking a huge risk that you're not going to end up with a big warehouse full of useless stuff.
And I did hear that in addition to Pfizer and Moderna, there are at least 2 other, I think 3 other vaccine manufacturers that are behind those 2 for sure, but they will be adding to the supply chain in relatively short order, assuming they get approved and so forth. So there's going to be a variety of manufacturers that are going to be producing vaccine that's available to the public.
And they're generally more traditional vaccines, not the mRNA kind. So the Pfizer Moderna ones are very similar. And some people say one's better, some say the other is. I don't really see any blue sky in between them. But these other ones may be very different. We'll just have to wait and see because no one knows. I mean, the public, we know very little about any of them right now.
Other questions? Steve, did you have any more questions?
No, I think that's just about it. I just wanted to, from a public health perspective, we're at a big transition point here where we're moving, I don't want to say from sectoral enforcement, from contact tracing, but we're definitely in the position where we have to back burner things on one part of the stove while we turn up the fire on the other side of the stove. So we're going to be focusing a lot of our energies over the next few months in providing vaccine and putting into place all the mechanisms that we've been drilling and exercising for more than a decade to make sure that we can do this. And I think the public should rest assured that we are prepared. And when it's time to get your vaccine, we'll be there to provide it to you, just like we were 11 years ago during H1N1.
We do have a hand up from my esteemed colleague, Nita Kincaid, my select woman here in attendance. Nita, welcome. Thank you for being here. You are unmuted.
Yes, this was a question I was thinking about at the very beginning. How are the decisions made right now with regards to each state and what they do get? And are we getting a fair deal on it in terms of how much we're getting in our small place?
That's a really good question. The decisions are made at the federal level and then pushed down to the local health department. A lot of it has to do with the capacity of the state to push out the vaccine in short order, and also the recipients that they have. So from I call it a political perspective, I don't know who or why the decisions are made, why a state may get more. I would like to hope it's based on supply and need. I know the ACIP makes recommendations about when it should be pushed out to different groups, but I don't think they have any say over where it goes first geographically. I don't know, Doctor, do you have any insight on that?
No, all I know is what I see on the news or read in the paper, and I'm as confused as anybody.
Yeah, same here. You know, we frequently, we hear things at the local level, sometimes at the same time that the majority of our population does. So, for instance, the governor's office could push out guidance today, making it very clear who's eligible in during 1B, and that will be news to us, just like it's news to you. So that's not unusual during this pandemic. If I had any more information about how those determinations are made, I'd be happy to share it with you. I just don't.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nita. Yeah, it seems like everything on the local level is going as well as can be expected, the things we can control, but when you hear about things on the national level, it's a little bit concerning. So, you know, Steve, you guys are doing a great job as always. We do have another question here in the chat. Sorry, I may have missed this. How will people in the high risk category, immune disorder, not older age, know when they can be vaccinated?
Good question. And there is a solid answer for it. Or I should say there will be a solid answer for it today or tomorrow about when that will happen and people in that category will be eligible. I can tell you in a nutshell how things are happening now. There's something called the VANS system. I'm sorry, VAMS, V-A-M-S, Vaccine Access Management System. It's something we're all required to use to actually register people who may be eligible during the phase 1 of the vaccine delivery. As we move closer to vaccinating the general population, that will likely change. But those individuals who may be eligible over a certain age, immunocompromised and so forth, will be notified that their group is eligible for vaccination, and you'll be given instructions about how to go to the certain website to register for a specific vaccination clinic like LedgeLight Health District, or if you don't have access to the website, we can always do it a different way. But we'll make it very clear through through media, letting people know when they're eligible and where and when they can get vaccinated. So feel free to give us a call here at LedgeLight Health District as we get closer, but just keep in mind the general population isn't going to be vaccinated toward the spring, and high-risk populations will be in phase 1B, which they haven't given us a date, but we still have quite a ways to go in 1A. Those nursing home residents and staff, frontline medical care workers, and first responders. Once that group is getting close to being finished, then we'll move to the next group of those more at-risk individuals and older folks.
Question. Again, if anyone has questions, we've got about 10 minutes left. If you wanted to post anything on either of the Facebook pages, we can certainly read it. If you want to raise a hand, if you're on the call, you can do that. And I'm just looking through to see if we've got anything new, which I don't see. Unless I missed it. Steve, maybe give a little, we talked a lot about the vaccine, and I think everybody's excited about the vaccine, and there's some unknowns and there's some knowns. But I think, not to be a Debbie Downer here, but the stark reality is we're in for a little bit of a long haul for the next probably 2 months or so. Is that accurate? And do you have any advice or suggestions, or just kind of give us a picture of where things are at right now from your vantage point?
Yeah, I think from a public perspective, you're right. We're looking at, I would say, more than 2 months, 3 or 4 months of continued, or the need for continued vigilance. I think we're going to see less cases in long-term care facilities. We've already seen a precipitous drop in the number of cases in long-term care throughout our jurisdiction from the beginning of the pandemic till now. So that's good. Those most vulnerable residents won't be at risk of dying from COVID nearly to the extent as soon as the vaccination takes effect, so to speak. But for most of us, it's status quo. We have to remain vigilant. And I know in my friends and family and the circles that I used to travel in, I try to be the best I can as far as keeping the group small and only really interacting with people in my home, and we're vigilant here at LedgeLight Health District. It's second nature now, wearing masks, social distancing, and having those remote meetings. I am a bit concerned that the idea that there's a vaccine on the horizon will further encourage people to let their guard down, but that's absolutely not what we should be doing now. Those mitigation measures that everybody's put in place have been going on for so long. There's a lot of COVID fatigue, but the way I look at it, I haven't put in, almost 11 months or 10 and a half months of effort to give up now. I'm COVID negative, my family's COVID negative, and I'm doing everything I can. And of course, just like anyone else, I could get COVID, but I don't want to say I got it because I decided to go for a mountain bike ride with, 12 of my friends that I haven't seen in 6 months. I'm going to stick it out. And I think everybody has to, remain vigilant and take it seriously and recognize the fact that these mitigation measures we've put in place are really working. And the schools are a great example of that. They've been so diligent and on top of social distancing and mask wearing and so forth, and we haven't seen a lot of transmission. So just stay the course.
We got a hand up, but I'll just say, I've personally been in the situation where and know of people who've been in situations where they were in proximity to somebody that had COVID, but had masks on, did the distancing, were doing all the right things, and did not get COVID. And so I think it just goes to the point that these mitigation strategies do work. So really, to be vigilant, Steve, and you're right. We've gone this long. What's a couple more months? But let me recognize here. I've got a phone number ending in 2756. You are recognized. You just have to unmute yourself. If you're on the phone, *6 should unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi, my question's for Dr. Weiner. I'm just curious, the study participants, does the study continue on, or now that the drug's approved, does it end? And if it does continue on, how much longer are they going to be under the study and evaluated? Any idea how much longer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the studies are going to go on for their intended length, which I think is 1.5 years of follow-up for Pfizer and 2 years for Moderna. It's a big problem, and a lot of discussion at the advisory committee is what to do with the placebo group, because now there's a vaccine available, and what they're going to do is there are a couple of ways they could do this and even keep the studies blinded, but basically they're going to vaccinate the placebo patients when their turn comes up to be vaccinated, when they're in like group 1B or whatever. But they're going to continue to follow them as well. So there'll be long-term safety follow-up, but it's just not practical, or probably not even right, to make the placebo patients stay on placebo. That's another downside of the EUA being early. But again, getting this out there when it's so desperately needed is more important than having a totally pure study from here on out. But the studies are going to continue.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for the question. I don't know if anyone else watched 60 Minutes last night, where they had some interviews with some Pfizer folks and whatnot. It was really, really interesting, and a lot of what some of the stuff you said, Dr. Weiner, was stated last night about the type of vaccine that this is, and how come this makes sense when maybe it wouldn't have, with the technology we have now. So I see this hand. I don't know if you have another question. If you do, go ahead. And 2756, unless you accidentally re-raised your hand. And
Yeah, I'm sorry.
oh, no problem. Thanks anyways, that's okay. Any last opportunity for questions from anyone out there? I'll just double check the online. Any parting words from any of our panelists tonight?
No, just thank you to you, Mike, for organizing this again and including all of us, and to Stephen. Thank you as always for your dedicated work, and it was lovely to meet you, Dr. Weiner, even if it's over the phone.
Same here.
Oh,
Thanks, everybody. And we're happy to come on whenever you'd like an update. And as things change, I'm sure there will be plenty of time to discuss all the changes.
yes, thank you, Dr. Weiner and Steve,
You're
for
welcome.
you and your whole staff's continued dedication to the area, and Danielle for making time to join us tonight. And we will post this recording. This will be good information for people in the coming months as well. But LedgeLight's always there. If you have a need, feel free to call them. You know, they're only a phone call away. And with that, we're at the end here. So hope everybody has a great night, and thanks for taking time out.
Thanks, everyone.
Good
Have a
night.
good one.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.